Today's episode is sponsored by LillyWorks, changing the game and solving the persistent problem of missed due dates in high-mix manufacturing so you can deliver in less time, on time, all the time. Visit them at LillyWorks.com.
Aerospace and defense manufacturing.
Machines and automation.
Additive manufacturing.
Smart manufacturing.
The global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm Amy Bryson, contributing lead editor of Smart Manufacturing magazine. Today we'll be talking about improving business performance and on-time delivery, which is a subject all manufacturers should be interested in. And my guest is Mark Lilly, president and CEO of LillyWorks, a company that focuses on helping manufacturers make on-time delivery an achievable goal. Now, Mark has 35 years of experience working with manufacturers, and he is well-versed in the latest advancements in things like Industry 4.0, IIoT, machine learning, and AI. And he'll help us thread the needle on all of those things that can help manufacturers improve their business performance. So I want to thank you for joining us, Mark, and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Amy. Appreciate you having me.
Wonderful. So before we jump into our discussion, Mark, can you give our listeners just a bit more background? I mean, you've been at this for 35 years. So if we can get a little more background about you and, what you and your team over at LillyWorks are working on.
Sure. So the team here at LillyWorks have a very long history of working with manufacturers, particularly in the production management area, and particularly in custom with custom manufacturers as well, and made-to-order job shops, even engineer-to-order type companies. And these are ones where production management, and in particular scheduling, tends to be the most challenging. So in fact, it all kind of started with my dad, who founded a couple different manufacturing ERP systems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one was called Profit Key way back in the 1980s. He founded that. And again, kind of for custom job manufacturers, job shops at the time. Had one of the first finite scheduling functionalities embedded in an ERP, which was unique for job shops in the 80s.
Wow, yeah, that's very innovative.
It was at the time. And then in the 1990s, he founded Visual Manufacturing, which was one of the first Windows-based ERP systems. And it also had the traditional model of, finite capacity scheduling embedded in it, similar to Profit Key, but now, enhanced in a Windows environment and more functionality and whatnot. What we interestingly found, and it was more looking back, was that most manufacturers and the thousands of companies that used either Profit Key or Visual struggle with getting what they'd want out of the scheduling tools. In other words, even though it had, the software was great, the functionality was great, much like any ERP system today typically also has this traditional model of finite scheduling embedded in it, and the software itself is great. What we found was the companies struggled with getting out of the system even the relatively simple things that you'd hope to expect, like where is the job, how is it tracking, what should I work on next is a big one, right? What really should be the priority? And we'll talk about that in this podcast as we move along. But typically, due date is the priority in most scheduling systems, and it seems to make perfect sense. It's a very important piece of information. That's your commitment to your customer, especially in a make-to-order environment. But when we look at it, it's actually, especially in a high-mix type of environment, where some jobs may take, weeks or even months, right, in terms of the production lead time, and other jobs are only days or maybe a few weeks. So when you prioritize based on due date, you're working on all the things that are due earlier at the expense of those items or orders that are due much later, but that need your attention now, right? Does that make sense? So that's just one of the points in many that we found folks struggle with. The other issue with the traditional finite scheduling model is that it's really not reflective of how execution actually happens in production. It's reflective of running a capacity loading algorithm, right? And it coming up with a order in which it has arranged your work orders so as to load capacity in a certain way, whether that happens to be, the traditional backward scheduling or forward scheduling or whatnot. So the issue with that is when you run this program and you come up with the plan and the resulting priorities, again, are the order in which the capacity loading algorithm placed your operations in each order, and you bring that out into production, you typically in the form of dispatch lists. Oftentimes, and more often than not, the production folks kind of look at the priorities and go, gee, these look a lot different than what we talked about this morning in the production meeting. Right? This really a strong mismatch there. And even if it's close, what happens is especially in a custom environment and a high mix type environment, something's going to change, right? A customer is going to call and change a due date. A material's not going to show up. Your best setup person calls in sick. So what might have been a halfway decent plan to execute now becomes not very good at all because it doesn't know these very recent changes. It feels like you have to go run the program again, right? So this is why after our experience with the finite scheduling tools in our own ERPs, a few years ago we came up with an entirely different approach to manage production. And in fact, we call this approach the dynamic production method. And we have a tool called Protected Flow Manufacturing that helps you implement the tactics and the principles to take advantage of that method.
So let's, if you can you walk us through, let's say someone is dealing with that finite model that you discussed. What is the point that they realize that they need a change? Is it because they're not able to handle all these complexities of customers changing deadlines, you lose, someone's out sick? I mean, how do they know that they need to change, or do they not know and you're just kind of guiding them that there's a better way to do things? What does that process look like?
So that's a great question. Typically what we find is, and I go to a lot of trade shows, and when we're in our booth and folks see that, we help with manufacturing production scheduling, they come to the booth and we typically ask a couple questions. One of them is, do you have an ERP system today, right? And most do. Most are using a certain ERP. And then the second question is, how are you actually managing production, right? And 9 times out of 10, regardless of what ERP system they're using, the answer is spreadsheets, right? They're not utilizing those finite scheduling tools embedded in the system. They may or may not have tried, and those that have tried really get what we do much more quickly. Those who haven't tried still get what we do, but the light goes on a lot faster for those who have tried. And it goes back to what seemingly makes sense but is difficult, and that is asking a computer program to come up with a plan, right, your schedule, that's actually executable out in production, right? So that capacity loading algorithm, the scheduling program that you run, is prioritizing work in a certain way, but it's not typically the way that production actually would want to prioritize to improve, to maximize their on-time delivery, or that they are prioritizing today. So there's a mismatch, and they're unable to use the results of that scheduling program to actually execute. Now, and then one of the big questions too is, right, from a sales or customer service perspective, how can I tell my customer when they're going to be able to get their order, right? So that's very much a future-looking thing, right? They may have lead times that are weeks, even months out to the future, right? So and that's the big question. That's kind of the holy grail around scheduling, is how can I tell my customer with confidence when they're going to be able to get this order that they're about to place with us, right? That may have a 6-week, an 8, a 12-week, even a 6-month lead time on it, right? And the issue gets back to the capacity loading algorithm is not representative of how they actually execute. So when you look at the resulting Gantt chart from a finite scheduling program, and you ask a production manager, look out at this operation that's out on the Gantt chart, maybe 6 weeks out or 8 weeks out, what's your level of credibility that that's actually where that job is going to run, right? And that the answer is, pretty low.
I would imagine that what you discussed, with a lot of shop floors struggling to maybe even know what the most important job is to work on next. And then, do they have even visibility into where all of the jobs are and how they're progressing? Those types of conversations that you have at shows or with people, are they able to be able to answer those questions, or is that the light bulb moment when they're saying, I really need something better here?
That's exactly what they're struggling with, and you really hit the nail on the head with one word, and that is visibility, and that's what folks struggle with most from an execution standpoint. And that's frankly why they've reverted typically back to spreadsheets. Is they're just trying to get their hands around what they need to work on today or this week, right? Just to have that visibility. And that's what we help with. And that's what we help with first and foremost. Even before we look out into the future, the method we use and the implementation approach we use to introduce this to companies has the production folks focusing first on the best way to execute, so as to maximize what they want to maximize. Now, by default, that's on-time delivery, in our method and in our system. But if they want to maximize, something else through production, like revenue, for example, they want to work on the highest throughput jobs or the highest revenue jobs first to maximize monthly revenue, they could do that, right? Or saving setups, setup efficiencies and things like that. They can do that. They can use a combination of things, but it's about being conscious and making a conscious decision about that. What do we want to maximize? So based on that answer, what should our priorities be, right? And then providing visibility in the best way to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I imagine you have a lot of conversations with customers about, from a production planning process, setting KPIs and aligning them to business goals. Do you see that is an area where manufacturers have a lot of success, or do they need a lot of consulting and expertise in setting the right KPIs that do align to the business goal and not just time frames, let's say?
Yeah, most of the companies who are struggling with scheduling are also struggling with on-time deliveries, right? And the percentages. And even if they're not formally calculating that and doing weekly or monthly metrics, they know roughly what it is, right? They know how much their customers are complaining, right, or have issues, or it may be just be the sales folks, right, who know they could be more competitive if they could quote and actually deliver to a 6-week lead time versus a 10-week lead time, for example, right? That type of thing. So even if they're not formally measuring it, most companies are aware and know intuitively or otherwise, kind of where their on-time delivery is. Now, there's a lot of, there's a lot of consulting, different methodologies, and we actually draw from a few of them. This dynamic production method actually draws from lean, from theory of constraints, from mathematical Q theory, and takes a few of these concepts and kind of combines them in such a way that the visibility that's provided with the information they already have, with their work order and routing information they already have, will take that information and provide the visibility so that they can answer those questions, right? What should be started now, right? Because that's another key point is you want to control how much and when work is sent out into production. So that's one of the key points during what we call the execution phase that we focus on. And why is that? Well, a lot of manufacturing companies that we walk into, they kind of have this quote unquote, right, intuitive idea that, geez, as soon as we have material, let's just get it out into production, right, and get things going, because the sooner we get it out there, the sooner it's going to finish on the other end, right? Well, unfortunately, no, right? And this is a lean concept. That's kind of what lean means, right? Lean out work and process, right? Lower WIP, right? And the idea is, which comes from mathematical Q theory. It's actually a proven mathematical formula that applies not just to manufacturing floors, but to anything that has, Q times to it, right? So you have material waiting for machines or work centers or people to work on it. Similarly, in a bank, right? You have people waiting for a teller, right? The next teller. It's kind of that simple in the sense that, if you go to the bank at lunchtime, right, when everybody else is going to the bank on their lunch break, you're going to have to wait a while. You may not be able to get to, go grab a burger or eat your sandwich, because you're probably going to be there for 45 minutes because the lines are relatively long, because a lot more people are there. Whereas if you'd been able to go at 9:15 or 9:30, right after they open up, when there's much fewer people, then the lines are going to be much less. You're going to be able to flow through your process much more quickly. And it's the same way in a manufacturing environment. The more work orders, the more material you have out in work and process, the much longer your queue times are going to be, the much longer every step is going to take and it's not the touch time of the step where value is actually being added. It's those queue times. And what's really interesting, if you get to the science or math of it, is that, and it's a little bit ironic, because what you also see in manufacturing environments is folks wanting to measure utilization, right? How utilized is every piece of equipment or every person, and that's nice to measure, and it's important to measure, but the problem is, if you're trying to force utilization to be really high, then what you have to do is make sure there's material at every work center. And that, by definition, increases your queue times. There's actually an inverse exponential relationship between utilization and queue times. So what that means is, the higher you're trying to push your machinery and people utilization, your queue times and lead times are becoming exponentially longer, right? Now, the neat part is the inverse is also true, right? So if I lower WIP, and it's getting back to the original point here, is if I can control, if I have an objective point in time on every work order that is the right time to introduce it into WIP, then overall the amount of work in work in process, the amount of material in work in process is going to be is lower. So whatever is in WIP is going to flow. The queue times are going to be much shorter, and it's going to flow through its respective operations much more quickly, reducing the lead times, improving the throughput, improving your on-time delivery, right? And that's the ironic dilemma, is that a lot of folks they're the measurement tools, some of the measurement tools they have in place are actually counteracting what ultimately they're trying to improve.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it feels like a very narrow view but what you're talking about is really that holistic view where you're seeing the entire battlefield and you're understanding how everything plays together or should play together.
Now, one of the challenges, granted, one of the challenges in implementing something like I just described is just what you said, a few minutes ago, and that is visibility. How can I get visibility of not only when I should be starting work, right? Really, really objectively, when should I be introducing? Because I don't want to introduce it too late, right? Obviously, because I don't want to be in danger of shipping it late. So I want to have enough time to make sure I get everything done. On the other hand, I want to improve that lead time, the throughput. So it's about that visibility. But then it's also, folks are concerned because they know they also don't have simple visibility of, okay, if I know what I should be working on right now, do I simply have the materials to do it, right? And that could be, do I have the raw materials? Have they come in from a purchase order? Do I have them in inventory? Or it could also mean midstream operations, right? If I'm at a lathe machine and I need it from the cutoff saw, the operation prior, has the saw completed that work yet, right? So should I be able to get my lathe machine running now on that job, right? That type of thing. So just having visibility of that is another key point.
Yeah, it points to the whole role of lead time, in this whole holistic supply chain management, which is a really interesting topic.
It does. We called our product protected flow. Key word there is flow, because the speed of flow. One of the fathers of MRP way back, even in the 70s, said, and you'll read this even in some of the MRP books way back when, is that the speed of the lead times and other benefits and improvements you can make in manufacturing are all dependent on the speed of flow of information and materials, right, in the shop, right, and that's key. So you need both. Obviously, you need the right information to make the right decisions, so that the production folks can know what best thing to work on next. Do they have the material to do it, so that the flow can happen and the speed of flow can increase through production.
So let's talk a little bit about, is there any kind of special training that's required if a shop wants to kind of transform their operations through this more advanced ERP system? What does that look like, and what is the impact on the actual workers? I would imagine it makes their jobs a lot more pleasant and maybe even more enjoyable. But, I'd love to hear if you have any anecdotes about that.
Yeah, we think so. What's key is that the production folks are involved in the process, right? This is not a management tool. It is certainly at a certain level once it's in place, but it's not something that just the managers implement, right? The production folks in an implementation of this approach and in the software tools, we almost insist that the production folks are involved, and in particular that the production leads, whomever they are, really understand and are bought into this. So typically we ferret that out, right up front, even before any commitment is made by the client. And in fact, where we see that that's not going to happen, if you've got some folks in production who've been doing the same thing for 30 years and really don't or are not interested in change, then that's a big red flag, right? Whereas, and we literally have an article written about this. So Modern Machine Shop was a few years ago now, but they went into one of our customers and asked them about their experience, and wrote about it, where they initially implemented this approach and had the big screen TVs up in the work centers with the priorities, and everything, all the data was flowing over from their ERP, and the real-time priorities were showing. So everything looked great. Problem was, several weeks later, they weren't seeing any improvements at all. So we went back in and met with the team, and they got us, together. We walked through the production facility and just realized, number one, the production folks, in particular the leads, weren't bought in. And in fact, many of them were still using their spreadsheets or priority methods they used prior, right? So there was no it was pretty apparent. So what we did was we did some training again, made sure we got the leads bought in so that they understood the principles and the concepts, and they realized that, the best thing to do for themselves, for the company, for their clients, was to, pick the job that's on the top of the list, right? That's the top priority in every department that had work. So and then the results came very quickly. So whip dropped, the speed of flow increased, and we saw a pretty dramatic improvement from there.
So what are some of the things, if you look ahead, that you're most excited about as it relates to, the advancements in technology and smart manufacturing and being able to help manufacturers improve their business performance? Are there any, product updates that you have coming down the pipeline, or any trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. One of them that we released a few months ago was called the Outside Services Execution Workstation. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but those who do subcontracting work or have work orders, production orders, wherein in the process they need to send material out for heat treating, plating, powder coating, what have you, can know that this is a challenge. And it injects a fair amount of variability into the production process, right? And it's often a significant part of the production lead time. If something has to go out for 10 days for heat treating, whereas, the internal operations are only taking maybe, a week or two or even a few days, right? So there's a lot of variability there. So while we've always had our internal what we call production execution workstation, and that's the one folks put on a big screen TV or may have tablets or workstations out in the shop. We do have an app for that, so you can see real-time priorities, and there's a version of that right for your iPhone or any mobile phone. And then so this new workstation actually shows similar information, only for the outside service operations. So what, of all the things that need to go for heat treating, right, you could see everything that does need to go out, will need to go out, has gone out, and then it answers those questions. All right, when will it need to go out? What's the priority of things that need to go out? Has it gone out? Do we have a PO out for that yet? When is it coming back, right? When should we expect it back? Is it back, right? They told us 10 days, 14 days ago. So those are nice to highlight, right? And so on and so forth. So that helps folks manage that variability. And ultimately, that's what DPM, or the dynamic production method, does for manufacturers. It helps manage all this inherent variability that exists in any production environment.
Yeah, and it all maps to that kind of holy grail that you talked about earlier, is having confidence in being able to tell a customer when they'll get their order, right? I mean,
exactly. Now, speaking of that, I'm glad you brought that up, because the other thing we do, and as part of our as part of DPM and the protected flow manufacturing software today, we run it in order to look at your future and see your future. Instead of running a scheduling program or a capacity loading algorithm, right, that's not really representative of how work is going to happen, what we do is we run a simulation program. So once priorities are established and folks in production are working against those priorities, we run a simulation against that out into the future to show the Gantt chart. So now the Gantt chart is representing how and when work is actually going to happen in the future, by work center, by machine, by person, by department, even considering certainly all the capacity of all your work centers and machines, your shifts, but also materials, right? Will I, even though I have enough material today, when I'm trying to place this operation on work order XYZ, 2 months from now, will I have enough of that item that has a 6-month lead time on it, right? So that's important to see now, so that when I get out there 2 months, it doesn't bite me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Now, this simulation program, depending upon how many work orders you have in operations, does take some time to run. It's a full simulation of all that information. So it can take, say for 200 work orders, and I'm in rough numbers, might take 10, 15 minutes. For 500 work orders, might take 20 or 30. For 5,000 work orders, it might take an hour 15, that type of thing. So folks don't want to, if you're on the line with a customer, for example, or you could certainly say, well, I can get back to you, but most folks want a pretty quick answer. So what we've done, if you want, you certainly can run the simulator any time of the day. It doesn't have to run at night or that type of thing. So you could run it and get your answer that way. And that's looking at, everything, the whole entire load of your shop, and whatever this new order is. Could be a new order they just gave you. It could be something you're quoting that you want to put into there and run the simulation. Okay, so again, the best and most complete answer is through the simulator. Might take some time. That being said, what we're coming up with, and what's about to be released, is what's called the Capable to Promise workstation. And this allows you to get a instant answer, very quick answer, because what it will do is it will take a new proposed order, and again, that could be something they did just order for you or something that's still in a quote phase, and lay it out into the existing capacity. Okay, so now there's kind of two answers to that type of what if, right? When could I get it? If it's the most important job and you don't care what it does to any of your other jobs, that's pretty easy. That answer comes up right away, because you're basically ignoring everything else. When could I get this out? With the work that needs to be done and some buffer time in there for some variability, right? The other extreme is, don't touch any of my other work orders, please. I don't want to affect their scheduled finish dates or predicted finish dates, but based upon the capacity that I do have, any gaps or holes, wherever it needs to fit, how can I fit this in, and when could I get that out? And so that's coming out in probably a month or two. It's very exciting.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, we'll have to regroup in a month after that hits the market and see how it's being received.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the biggest questions is you even, we partner with some ERP systems, and one of the biggest questions on RFPs is just that, what do you have capable to promise?
Well, that's great. Now you have an answer.
So we feel we have one of the best answers in the marketplace for capable.
So we've covered a good bit of ground. What else is important for our listeners to know, do you think?
So on top of this simulation, I think, so in what I've indirectly described through our conversation so far are 3 phases of implementing this approach. The first phase is execution, right? So we're taking information from the ERP through an integration platform we have, and in real time, it's establishing priorities out in production so that folks can see when they should start work, do they have the materials to do it, and once it is started, what's most important to work on next in any department, work center, machine, etc. Now, the next step is running that simulator, and that simulator is going to show you your future view, right, as I described, kind of that future Gantt chart. But it's also going to show you visually and either in a spreadsheet type format. It's going to show you load versus capacity, for example, either by day, by week, by month. What's the capacity of each one of my resources? Again, down to the machine, person, department, what have you. And how loaded is it, and will it be out into the future? So that's a really nice, that's there today, really nice view. And then you can also identify what your bottlenecks are today, or what they're going to be, and that is, what's going to hold me up? What's going to slow me down in the future? Is that because I don't have enough CNC machines? Is it because I don't have enough operators to run? I have 30 CNC machines, but I only have 15 people to run them, right? Or is it even materials, right? Will materials be a problem for me and will hold me up? So this is what you can see through this future simulator. When most folks see their future, right, they don't particularly care for it, right? So they want to do what ifs, and the what ifs are the phase 3 of our implementation. And this is where this is where it gets back to how important it is to be able to believe that future picture that you're looking at. Because what sense does it make to do a what if on a future picture that you have no faith in, that isn't credible at all? So we take that credible picture of your future and then allow you to apply what ifs in the sense of capacity changes, right? What if I add a shift to this department? What if I'm actually able to hire 2 more welders, right? What would that, how would that improve my on-time delivery on different orders? There's negative impact capacity change, right? What if Bob and Joe decide to go deer hunting for 2 weeks in November, and then my best setup folks, right? How is that going to affect things? Or what if sales gets that big order, kind of like we talked about in the CTP conversation? And then you can see that you run the simulation on these capacity changes, and then you can actually analyze the difference between your current future reality and what this new what-if reality looks like in terms of how much better will my on-time delivery be, or worse, and also in terms of the financial impact. So we can bring in sales revenue for sales orders, match that up to the supplying work orders, or you can explicitly establish a value for the work orders. So you can see, what does my future reality look like in terms of revenue generation, and how much better, or how would it impact it if I made a certain capacity change? So yeah, really a strong leverage point for helping grow a business, right?
And to your point, it's, there's so many different variables that are you can plan for, and then there's the unplanned that always happens. You're able to plug those in with those what if scenarios and achieve resiliency that so many manufacturers really strive for.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So Mark, if people want to learn more about the work you and your team at LillyWorks are doing, where should they go?
reach out certainly reach out. Feel free to reach out to me, mark.lilly, Mark with a K, Lilly, at LillyWorks.com. That's LillyWorks with an S on the end of it. Or feel free to just peruse our website, LillyWorks.com. If you go to products and protected flow manufacturing, you'll see a 3-minute intro video there. There are customer success stories on the website. There's also under, I think it's the blog area, there are also recorded webinars. So you could, spend, if you want to spend more than the 3 minutes on the video, we even have close to hour-long videos on the topic. So feel free to learn and then reach out if you want to take the next step and see how it might impact your environment or help you. We'd be happy to have a conversation.
Wonderful. Well, Mark Lilly, I want to thank you for taking time to join us and share your valuable insights with our listeners. And I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Make sure that you stay up to date about what's happening in advanced and smart manufacturing, and hear more podcasts by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org. Take care.